Roman army who had a reputation for being a God-fearing right and righteous, and was well spoken of by the Jewish community. He told him that Cornelius was instructed by an angel to send for Peter and to hear a message from him. The next day Peter went to the house of Cornelius, which was in Caesarea. When he got there, Peter realized the meaning of the vision that the message of salvation through Jesus Christ was meant for the Gentiles also. This would begin a new phase in the apostle and church's work. They would take the gospel to any who would listen and receive it. The Christians who were scattered during the time of Stephen's stoning, had made their way to Phoenicia, now Lebanon, Cyprus, and Antioch in Syria. They preached to the Jews in these areas, and some started preaching to the Gentiles. When the church in Jerusalem heard of this, they sent Barnabas to Antioch to help and encourage them. Many people came to Jesus. Barnabas then went to Tarsus to find Saul and bring him to Antioch, which he did. Barnabas and Saul spent an entire year in Antioch teaching and preaching to the converts. It was in Antioch that the term Christian originated from. Prior to this, converts were known just as disciples. A prophetic warning came to the Christians in Antioch that there would be a famine in the world. They determined that they would send contributions to those Christians living in Judea. The famine happened in the reign of the Caesar Claudius. They sent Barnabas and Saul to Judea in charge of distributing the contributions. Now around this time, King Herod Agrippa I started persecuting the Christians in Jerusalem. Herod had James, the brother of John, put to death and had Peter imprisoned. Herod Agrippa ruled from 41 AD to 44 AD. From Jewish accounts, he was well liked by the religious Jewish establishment. He seemed to have a strong interest in Jewish culture and went out of his way to please them. He wanted their acceptance, whether it was for political reasons or for a genuine interest in the Jewish customs, we cannot know for sure. Peter would be rescued from jail by an angel. Later, Herod would go to Sidon in Tyre, which is in Lebanon, to give an address. During his speech, the people were calling him a god and not a man. The Bible reports that an angel struck him down for accepting the people's worship. He was consumed by worms and died. The persecution of Christians in Jerusalem ceased, and the church would have a measure of time to expand and grow. Jewish Christians living in Israel would only have a little over 20 years left to preach to the Jews living there before the factions of zealots would go to war against Rome and cause the destruction of the temple and the dispersion of the Jews. As time would pass, the apostles' number would start to shrink. James, the son of Zebedee, would go home to Jesus first in 44 AD, killed with the sword. It was said he was beheaded and that he was able to convert his accuser, and they both were executed together. Philip was said to have preached in Phrygia, a Roman province near Ephesus in Turkey, and was crucified in 54 AD. Matthew was said to have preached in Ethiopia and was killed with a sword or halberd in 60 AD. Andrew was crucified at Patriarchaea in southern Greece. It is said that he was alive on an X-shaped cross for 2 days, and he exhorted spectators the whole while. Bartholomew preached in Mesopotamia, in the areas today known as Iraq, Iran, and India. There are two accounts of his fate. One says he was crucified in India. Another says he was skinned alive and then beheaded at Derbent on the Caspian Sea. Thomas preached in Parthia, in Iran, Kerala in southern India, and in Mylapore, Madras, India, where he was thrust through with a spear in 72 AD. James the Less, at 90 years old, was crucified and stoned and had his head bashed in with a fuller's club. Jude was crucified in Edessa, Turkey in 72 AD. Simon the Zealot preached in Africa and was thought to have been crucified in Britain in 74 AD. Peter, around 64 AD, was crucified upside down at his request because he felt he was unworthy to die in the same manner as Jesus. John, one of the sons of thunder, was the only apostle thought to have died from old age and not martyred. He wrote the book of Revelation when he was imprisoned on the Isle of Patmos around 96 AD. It was said that they tried to boil him in oil, but he would not die. Perplexed, they imprisoned him on Patmos until the death of the Emperor Domitian. Domitian was persecuting Christians at that time, but upon his death the new emperor released political prisoners, and John was one of them. And John went to Ephesus, to the church there, and stayed until he died. John's tomb is located in Selkirk, Ephesus, in Turkey. Paul, the 13th apostle, was beheaded by Nero also around 64 AD. Mark, the writer of the Gospel of Mark, was dragged to death. Luke, the writer of Luke and Acts, was hanged on an olive tree. Matthias, the replacement for Judas, was stoned at Jerusalem. And Judas Iscariot had committed suicide after betraying Jesus. Judas, in his grief, tried to return the 30 pieces of silver that he received from the high priest for leading the authorities to Jesus, but they could not take back the blood money. So Judas threw the coins down, and he went out and hung himself. His body at some point fell, and his guts burst out. The priest then used the money to buy the field that he died in, to bury foreigners who would pass away in Jerusalem. The lives of these men didn't end when they physically died. They went on to their rewards. Those who remain faithful to Jesus Christ to the end shall join him in heaven, and those who do not accept him await final judgment for their sins. The reality of life is that it ends, and we must choose the path that we follow: eternal life through Jesus Christ, or the path of eternal sorrow. We need to choose well, and we need to choose wisely. Thank you for your interest in this show, and may God bless and keep you.
The Revelation 13 podcast is hosted by Mike Hopwood and is a podcast dedicated to the study of end-time events, news events, and ancient mysteries.